back to VETChat. I'm Kathryn Bell, CEO of the Webinar Vet, and today we are bringing you the next Women's Health podcast of the year. And I am delighted to be joined by Karli Büchling to discuss the gender health gap and the power of periods. Really looking forward to this conversation. But before we get started, let me introduce our guest today. Karli is a British entrepreneur and women's health innovator, pioneering transformative solutions in female healthcare. As the founder of Natal Comfort, she created the award-winning Anna Pregnancy Pillow, redefining pregnancy comfort. Now, as founder and CEO of Blake Health, she is establishing Europe's first menstrual blood biobank, to revolutionise women's health research. Recognised among the top 200 trailblazing leaders in women's health by Women of Wearables 2023, Karli also won the Liverpool Slushed Pitch event and delivered a TED Talk on menstrual blood's medical significance, which is set for release in 2025. Through Blake Health, she is advancing evidence-based research and reshaping female healthcare. So welcome, Karli, to VETChat.
Hi, Kathryn. So nice to be here. And I'm so happy that we finally got a chance to chat.
Yes, me too. We met a very long time ago, didn't we, at Liverpool Slushed, and we've been trying to get this sorted ever since.
It's embarrassing, really. But I'm just really grateful for the opportunity to bring more awareness, to this very important cause.
Yeah, absolutely. So to kick us off, I mentioned two things there in the introduction, which it'd just be great to kind of go over. What is the gender health gap?
So the gender health gap refers specifically to how the medical system and all of the treatments, causes, and diagnosis is predominantly based on the male physiology. And this is because women haven't been allowed to participate in any research or clinical trials since before 1993. And there has been an overarching assumption made that women are just smaller men.
Yeah.
But the first time a woman actually stepped into a clinical trial was in 1997. And because of that, we now understand that there are significant differences between the male physiology and the female physiology. The differences trickles through into the medical industry and across care, funding, and prioritization. This is because you would find things like 70% of women have a less likelihood to survive a heart attack than men when they are taken to ER, because the way in which we experience heart attacks are significantly different to male, but the care, the policies, and the diagnosis around that is predominantly based on the male physiology. So you wouldn't know that a woman is experiencing a heart attack.
Wow, that is insane. And I can't believe 1997, was it you said, was when the first trial happened on a woman. That's insane.
Yeah, so it was in 1993 that it became lawful to include women in clinical trials, but the first time a woman actually stepped into it was in 1997, which, just to bring it into context, is the same year Princess Diana passed away.
Wow.
No, it's absolutely crazy.
It is crazy. Okay, thank you. And then the second thing that we mentioned right at the start, which again, it would be great just to get a bit of thoughts around. So what is the menstrual blood biobank?
So basically what it comes down to is menstrual blood has been heavily stigmatized against. And this is why we find, like you whispering, I'm on my period. Women don't really talk about it. Men don't really talk about it. But what we have found is that there are less than 400 studies on menstrual blood. And if you compare that to sperm, there's over 15,000 studies conducted on sperm. And everyone has always treated menstrual blood as waste. It's dead cells, it's useless, it's a hygienic issue. But menstrual blood is everything but those things. Menstrual blood contains over 800 unique proteins that's not found in our systemic blood. It contains very little blood, actually. It contains vaginal discharge and, the most important thing, endometrium lining, which is the inside of your uterus shedding every single month. We're also finding, as more and more studies are conducted on the menstrual cycle, that the way in which women should take, for example, medication, the way we regulate hormones, the way in which we feel, our productivity, our sex drive, it's all based around our menstrual cycles. And for example, just to give you a very simple example, if you go for blood tests, depending on which phase of your menstrual cycle you're in, your results will be different. Like just for even vitamin levels, your vitamin levels will look different because as you go through your cycle, your hormonal cycle, your body, which this doesn't happen to men at all, our bodies are constantly in a fight for or fight against our lives. So they are either pro women and pushing everything into our health and well being. And then once you've ovulated, your body believes that you're pregnant and it reserves all its resources to make sure it keeps it for the baby, that because it thinks you're pregnant until your next period arrives. Because of this, and when you shed, you start bleeding and you'll shed your endometrium lining. That's like the beginning of a new cycle. Your body knows it's not pregnant. And I looked at how can we advance the gender health gap? How can we advance research in women's health and close this gap really, really fast? And when you look at urine, spit, blood, as I've mentioned, sperm, all of these elements of that the human body produces has loads and loads of research behind it, but menstrual blood doesn't. These
Okay.
800 proteins can tell us not only cause, but also diagnose and treat different female conditions that we might have. So I thought, like, how can we accelerate research in menstrual blood? And that's how I came up with the idea of a biobank.
Wow, fantastic. Okay. And what sort of led you to become an advocate for women's health? Because you're clearly like so passionate about this. Where did this kind of come from?
When I was at uni, I became very ill and I had to go for routine blood tests every single week. And it was very tiring. And one of those times I was on my period, well, many of those times, but there's one specific time I was on my period. And I asked the nurse if she could rather take a menstrual blood sample rather than a venous blood sample. And she laughed it off, saying that that's disgusting, not like very shameful behavior, which is how society views menstruation. And that stuck with me for years and years and years. But at that time, there was hardly any research into menstrual blood. And fast forward into it, and as I became pregnant, I wanted to sleep on my stomach. Couldn't find any pillow that will allow me to sleep on my stomach. So I cut a pillow out of medical foam using my grandmother's electric meat carver. I used that pillow throughout my entire pregnancy. And really, that experience, together with partnered research with the University of Manchester, I realized I learned more about the gender health gap and how women have been deliberately excluded, but even the way in which clinical trials are designed, the policies that underpin those are discriminating against women. For example, we wanted to include more minority groups in our research study, and we couldn't because of where the research facility is based. We're only allowed to recruit participants in relation to the demographic breakdown of that area. So I was like, okay, we need to break down all these barriers, which is part of why we're doing a menstrual blood biobank, because we want to make sure that we provide a wide variety of samples to researchers to
Mhm.
accelerate research in this field and go from 400 studies to 20,000 studies in menstrual blood. The other challenge that we find with menstrual blood is that because it can be so different, the consistency of the menstrual blood, the makeup of that sample
Mhm.
really is impacted by everything. It's impacted by environment, it's impacted by nutrition, it's impacted by the contraception you're on, even.
Mm.
So we wanted to create a really rich resource biobank so that every research study that comes out of the samples that's in this biobank can be compared like for like, which can't be done right now. So out of those 400 studies in menstrual blood, it's very hard to compare those because you have very limited information on the participants that partaked in that research study.
Yeah. Okay, I understand. And is technology kind of helping at all? With obviously the advancements of tech, is that going to sort of help you with everything that you're doing?
Technology is useful in terms of advocacy, education, and menstrual blood and the biological power of it. But in terms of finding diagnosis, cause, and treatment, it's not very useful at the moment. It's actually a subject I'm very passionate about because I'm seeing more and more, especially artificial intelligence, being used to diagnose female conditions.
Yeah.
But the reality is, we don't have the research, we don't have the knowledge, we don't have the data. And there has been talks about implementing these artificial models or patterns in data that's collected by like period tracking apps.
Mhm.
But I don't know about you, but I'm never consistent in logging my period, my symptoms, my experience. And I find with period tracking apps, it is changing. There's loads of new technology coming into the market.
Okay.
But in the past, period tracking apps were for one of two reasons, either to avoid pregnancy or to become pregnant.
Yeah.
So the moment you have achieved any of those two things, you tend to drop off the app. So you can't just rely on user data to find cause, diagnosis, or treatment for any female conditions.
Yeah. That's so true.
Yeah.
Um, okay, fantastic. And then just thinking more from a kind of veterinary practice perspective, do you think that there are enough conversations around women's health issues like periods, endometriosis, all of these things? Or do you think that women's health needs to be more prevalent in sort of, professional workplaces?
Absolutely. I think no is my answer. Or if those conversations are happening, it's happening behind closed doors or in the bathroom, whispering. But I think there is a huge opportunity to make menstrual cycle education part of workplace policy,
Mhm.
essentially, because even men should know about this. I mean, for most people I know, their husbands, partners, boyfriends only really learn about periods because they tell them, because it impacts your life, your day to day. When you're on holiday and suddenly your period comes on, you have to like ask your partner to go and get you tampons, for example,
Yeah.
you know. So I think there's definitely a huge lack of education and knowledge sharing in the workplace when it comes to menstruation. And I personally have started being more open about it. When I'm on calls, I say, I'm sorry, if there's something happening or it's out of character, I'll be like, I'm sorry, I'm on my period, or I'm feeling really low this week because it's the week before my period.
Mm.
And by saying those things, you are immediately breaking down the shame,
Yeah.
that surrounds it. And other women start to feel more empowered about it. But also, the men on my team are more aware then, And at first, they'll giggle and be like, how could you say that? But if you start normalizing it, it's becoming more of an education, and you can then apply better practices, better support for women in the workplace, especially women who suffer from uterine conditions such as endometriosis, PCOS, heavy periods. Like, that's not normal. 80% of women experience period pain. That is not normal. And because of the lack of research, because of the lack of education, because of the lack of knowledge, and the lack of medical training, because doctors only get 4 months of training when they become a GP into women's health, only 4 months.
Insane.
You break down that stigma by opening up the conversation. And if there is more done in the workplace from the employer's point of view around these issues, then you create a platform where everyone feels comfortable to talk about it. And that in itself break down the shame.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's fascinating. It's actually quite timely that we're recording this because I've got a little girl who is 9, so she's in year 5, and she's just learning this week all about puberty.
Okay.
And it's it is, as you were sort of talking through things, then I was thinking, it's great that she's coming home and she's like really openly talking to me about periods and things like that, because I know when I was at school it wasn't really discussed. So I guess that's a positive from that perspective, that the next generation are kind of being more open about these things and there's less of a kind of stigma surrounding it all.
Yeah, and I think boys need to be part of that conversation. They don't need to know the ins and outs and how to insert a tampon or use a pad or
Yeah,
anything like that. But I think knowledge around it is really, really important across all genders, not just in young girls. And something I personally hope to see in the next coming years is that the education around puberty also includes your menstrual cycle, the different phases you go through during your menstrual cycle, because that in itself is so empowering. There are studies that show that there's alignment between phases and how women experience it. I'm personally following fasting like a girl, where you fast according to your menstrual cycle. And I used to feel really tired when I was on my period, but since fasting, I feel stronger, more energetic. Like, it's almost like that bleed is like a fresh start for me of the month. I feel like a huge release, a huge relief, and I have like this burst of energy, and I just can almost do anything over those 3 4 days that I bleed. So it really depends on where you are, what your routine is, what your nutrition is, what diet you're on. And the best thing anyone can do for their kids when they start their period is start tracking it. You don't need to track it with her, she doesn't need to track it. You can just do it by yourself. But in years to come, that information, you can do it like in a notebook.
yeah,
That information would be absolutely vital when she goes to a doctor about anything. For example, I went through a phase last year where I was fainting on the first day of my period for 3 months, every month, fainting on the first day of my period. It happened only those 3 months. I've seen a cardiologist and they say there's no relationship with it. And based on, it's crazy. And then based on my work with Warwick and learning more about endometriosis, I've learned that fainting during your period is actually a sign of endometriosis, early signs of endometriosis, because some women develop endometriosis only later in their lifetime.
wow,
So it's just one example of why it is so important. The best thing you can do for your child is to start tracking their period, making little notes about how they are maybe feeling or behaving, because even that can be so empowering, like knowing, okay, I feel low today because I'm in this phase of my period, and that's normal for me, you know.
yeah,
And
absolutely.
actually, when I do, when I eat chocolate, I feel worse, or when I go for a walk, I feel better, or whatever. It's all knowledge that empowers you, which is what the medical system does not have. It's not trained, it's not set up. and it doesn't hold any of that information or knowledge. And that, by having a diary for yourself and even for your child, when you go see a doctor, you have that information, and it can be so insightful and so empowering when you have conversations with your GP about it.
Yeah,
But in the
absolutely.
workplace specifically as well, like if you could say to your manager or receptionist or anyone, like, I just need less appointments this week, maybe, or regular breaks, because I know that that specific week is a difficult week for me to manage. And in order to get through it, I just need, 10-minute breaks in between seeing patients, for
Yeah.
example.
Yeah, absolutely. Have you got any other advice? Obviously, we've touched upon, more breaks. Any other sort of practical tips that would be quite good, that practice managers potentially who are listening could implement in practice, even if they're just little things that might really help people as, throughout the month?
If I was listening to this, I would set up one-to-one calls with each of my female practitioner or vets. I
Yeah.
don't know, what do you call them, vets?
Yeah.
And I would ask her, how can you support her more? Like,
Mhm.
would this make, you've listened to this podcast, how could you support better? Because the reality is, you can say a long walk, you can say take regular breaks, but at the end, every one of us, which is why it's so important to track, is you would realize what works best for you doesn't necessarily work best for another person,
Yeah.
especially if you're suffering from heavy bleeding or painful cycles. It's really important to be open and have a safe space to discuss those things, and put things in place that will help you support through it.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that's what I would say, is have a one to have an open conversation.
Mhm.
It is hard, but I promise it gets easier. The more you talk about it, the easier it gets. And you start to realize that you are creating a safe space where people can openly talk about this, menstruation and menstrual blood specifically, as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting, I only really, through doing podcasts like these, really started to understand how you feel differently each week of the month, and it's all linked to your cycle. Like, even things like that, just having that understanding of why you might be feeling the way you do that week versus other weeks is also like so empowering to kind of know it's normal. Like, this is like a really normal thing for you to go through that week.
Yeah, and that's normal for you. We're not talking about normal in the grander scheme of things,
Yeah.
because every single one of my girlfriends experience their menstrual cycle differently. It's really about what is normal for you,
Mhm.
and what works for you. So it's fascinating. And when you start tracking, like for last week, I was on my period, and I decided every time it's my period, I do something different with it because of the field I'm in. And we are developing this kit that will enable women to send menstrual blood to the biobank for research. So part of that developing of that kit and wanting to understand menstrual blood better, I've been collecting it and weighing and measuring it with my kitchen scale. And even that has been so insightful. Like, it is so little blood that you lose, but it feels like it's the whole ocean, that's coming out of you.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
and even that has been so empowering, like understanding how my period changes day by day. You can literally see, okay, it's the wound creating on day one. Day two, it's like the majority of the endometrium lining that comes out. Day three is the last bit of it. And day four and five is like literally just the end of that bleed, finishing off. It's very little, it's very gooey. It's almost like a solid rather than like a runny consistency.
Mhm.
And even that has been incredibly insightful to me and so empowering. And I'm telling everyone, listen, you need to like measure your menstrual blood and weigh it, because it is in some days where I've measured, it will measure the same in a teaspoon, but it would be heavier on the scale, the same amount of menstrual blood, because of the amount of endometrium lining that's in it.
And is this where the kit that you mentioned comes in? Is this explain the kit to us and what that is for people listening?
Yeah, so part of the biobank and making sure it's accessible to everyone, because we also want women who maybe for religious reasons don't talk about menstruation, needs to go into hiding when they menstruate. We want everyone to have the opportunity to partake in research and close the gender roles gap and be part of that journey. So we are developing what we used to call it a donation kit, but women will be incentivized to participate in research and send us their menstrual blood. So it's a home collection kit for menstrual blood where you will be able to order your kit online, and it will deliver to your home, and you would collect your menstrual blood, pop it in this box and drop it off at the post office, and it will go straight to the biobank. It will be checked, follow all of our policies and protocols, and then banked and made available to researchers to conduct research. And we're just working through developing that kit now, in
Okay.
partnership with Warwick University. So it's very exciting.
Yeah, it
But
sounds
this means that you don't need to leave your house. You don't need to go and sit in a clinic or in a hospital, which could be traumatic for a lot of people, to give a sample of your menstrual blood. And through our online web app, you'll be able to also track how we use your samples, like what research are you contributing to, and what difference is it making.
fantastic. And did you, I think you've mentioned to me previously, the sort of like end goal is obviously you'll have so much more data, obviously to work from, but it could essentially mean the end of things like smear tests and things like that because everything will automatically be collected through the bank. Is that right?
Correct. Absolutely. We hope to eliminate the smear test all completely. You won't need to even have it. So the smear test is just a DNA test. In the plainest form, it's a DNA test. So that's why you would see women who go for regular smear tests that then get cervical cancer, but it's never been detected through the smear. It's because it's a DNA test, not a biomarker test.
Hmm.
So menstrual blood could unlock cause, diagnosis, and treatment for over 20 uterine conditions. So such as endometriosis, PCOS, heavy menstrual bleeding, breast cancer, cervical cancer, uterine cancer. And menstrual blood even contains stem cells, the same quality stem cells that you find in bone marrow. So it's a lot more accessible, a lot easier to get our hands on. And those stem cells are already used to treat conditions like leukemia and lymphoma today. So menstrual blood is really like this powerful resource. And the biobank is creating a platform where we can collect samples, accelerate research in this field. And by doing research with a lot of researchers, in partnership with a lot of researchers, we'll
Hmm.
be able to accelerate it and start drawing patterns between all of this research studies that we unlock. But yes, the aim is that you just use a menstrual blood sample to get an endometriosis diagnosis, because today you have to be you need to go for surgery to get an endometriosis diagnosis. Same with PCOS, cancer, and we'll be able through menstrual blood to do a cervical cancer diagnostic test rather than doing the smear test.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing. And when are you hope? I know it's obviously there's lots going on at the moment, but are you hoping it'll be like relatively soon that everything will launch and people can start to get involved?
Yes, I feel every time someone asks me this question, I say 3 months, and then 3 months go by, and haven't launched yet. But we are hoping to launch the biobank and the collection kit towards the end of this year. It's just, if like, this is just advice for anyone. If you think you're taking this on, it's like it takes 3 times longer than you think it will do. It is, and part of that is the discrimination. Part of that is, the lack of knowledge and the lack of appetite, almost,
Mhm.
to unlock the biological power of menstrual blood. It's still seen as a huge hygienic issue. It's not. It's a health issue. Menstruation is health. That's what it is, especially when you look at the female physiology.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, well, we are out of time, Carly, but
I'm
thank
a
you.
little ready.
I think it's absolutely fascinating what that you are doing. Thank you so much for sharing it with us. Is there anything else you wanted to share before we wrap up with our listeners?
Well, follow me on Instagram under Period Dealer. I think that's where I'll post the most updates. And then we're just busy designing the collection kit and going through that whole process. So come and say hi and talk to me. Like, any questions anyone has, just reach out to me on Instagram on the Period Dealer, or LinkedIn under my name, Karli Büchling. And I hope this is informative. And if you've learned anything or have any more questions or anything like that, just reach out to me. I love connecting with people who share my passion. So,
Brilliant. Oh, well, thank you so much. And we are in the Webinar Vets Veterinary Wellness Hub. We will make sure that we keep in touch, and we'll keep that posted with all the developments as well as it goes through, because I think it sounds absolutely incredible. And everything that you've kind of talked about today, it's lots of food for thought for people, I am sure, as they are listening in. And I really hope everybody will get involved as well. So thank you so much, Carly. It's been lovely to chat.
thank you so much. Have a nice afternoon.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.